Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Jennifer Brewer on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce. We are opposed to SB 3 and have identified it as a job killer this year. We do have policy concerns about this bill, but given that this is a fiscal committee, I'll try to keep my comments germane to that issue. The governor in his January proposed budget raised a lot of fiscal concerns with regards to our budget and the potential for a recession in 2017, 2018. Those same concerns are what private sector fears as well. In 2017 and 2018, the governor projected that we'll have a recession that will take us to a $29 billion deficit in 2019 and 2020. The private sector will feel that budget deficit as well. We will feel the same type of revenue loss in the private sector as well. And so if we're facing a $29 billion deficit while these minimum wage increases are scheduled to go into effect, that's a huge cost and a huge concern for a lot of the private sector employers. And I know the response is going to be, well, there's off-ramps in this proposal that will take care of that. So let's talk about those off-ramps for a minute, because I agree with Mr. Sutton that those are appreciated, but I think they also need to be mandatory. One of the off-ramps is that if there is a budget deficit, they can suspend the minimum wage increase, but that can only be utilized twice. The governor projects that we're going to have a recession from 2017 that will end around 2020. Those are 3 years. And then we have to take into consideration the recovery. After the last Great Recession, we still have regions of the state who have not fully recovered from that recession. And so if we can only utilize that budget deficit off-ramp twice, there's certainly going to be years when we'll have a budget deficit and that will already be utilized. Again, that's discretionary, as Mr. Sutton mentioned, not mandatory. So we have that off-ramp. So then there's the second off-ramp, right? That we have to look at a combination of the labor market decline and sales and tax revenue. I agree that the labor market decline should be a consideration that we should look at for suspending the minimum wage, but it should be mandatory. The sales and tax revenue, that's an interesting one as well. That's one of our main funding sources for the budget, but it's not the only funding source. There's two others, the personal income tax and the corporate tax. When the Legislative Analyst's Office looked at the $15 minimum wage on the ballot, they indicated that there's a likelihood the sales and tax revenue will actually increase with the minimum wage, and not because there's going to be this huge economic increase in spending, but because businesses who are saddled with these costs will create higher prices for consumers, which will then increase the sales and tax revenue. So I wonder if that will actually be an off-ramp that we'll be able to utilize, because it may never come to fruition where the sales and tax revenue goes down. But what will happen is a decline in the personal income tax revenue and the corporate tax revenue. Why don't we look at those for potentials for off-ramps to determine whether or not a minimum wage should be suspended? Those are huge funding sources for the general budget. What my issue kind of is coming to is that, look, we understand that there's a ballot initiative that's already qualified for the ballot. We understand that this is supposed to be a better alternative, and we think it can be a better alternative. There's a lot of fiscal concerns that the private sector is going to be looking at, the same as what the state is going to be looking at. And we think that this provides a great opportunity to mitigate some of those fiscal concerns, but it just hasn't been realized yet with this proposal. And so while we're hopeful that our concerns will be taken into consideration, there's plenty of time to do that before the ballot initiative needs to be removed and before this needs to be pushed through the legislative process. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Chris McKaylee on behalf of the California Ambulance Association, and we come at this from a little bit unique perspective. We did oppose AB 10 with the last 25% phase-in, and as Senator Leno is well aware, we opposed the prior iteration of this bill, and here's why. This industry provides 82% of the 911 transports in the state of California. More than 25% of those are funded by Medi-Cal. We are woefully underpaid like many other providers. We roughly get paid $153 on average statewide for providing a benefit that costs nearly $600. So we are in great need of a funding increase, and when the legislature continues to impose additional costs of doing business, as Mr. Sutton outlined, be it worker comp, energy, minimum wage, tax, etc., those all get borne by the private sector, and at some point the system entirely breaks down. And again, we provide an important role in our EMS system in the state of California. We have two specific concerns with this proposal beyond what has already been iterated. One is the cost, the CPI indexing. There are only 16 states today that even do that, and 7 of them relate strictly to CPI as the benchmark. The other thing is that when you increase the minimum wage, it also drives up all other salaried employees. Those who are exempt from overtime, for example, the first test is you must be paid 2 times minimum wage. So the practical effect is not only driving up the actual amount of minimum wage being paid, but that for salaried workers as well. That also has a direct impact on worker comp costs, uniform costs, tool reimbursements, et cetera. All those costs being borne by the private sector, those costs that we can no longer bear. Thank you.
We'll go ahead to organizations. Again, if there are businesses, small businesses who have traveled a long way, I give you a little bit of leeway, but if you're an organization, please just state your name and organization.
Madam Chair and members, Dwight Hansen on behalf of the Alliance supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We're a little bit of a tweener on this because we're not opposed. So with your indulgence, I'd like to touch very quickly on 2 points.
If you'll wait, let's go through the no's and then we'll get the in-betweeners.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Angie Minetti with the California Retailers Association in opposition.
John Caldwell on behalf of the California Hotel Lodging Association, as well as the California Association of Boutique and Breakfast Inns in opposition.
Madam Chair and members, Tony Gonzalez representing the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. Regretfully, we oppose the bill.
Brian Little with the California Farm Bureau Federation in opposition.
Fred Main on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance of Ventura and Santa Barbara County in opposition to the bill.
Matthew Allen, Western Growers Association, also in opposition.
Julie Broyles on behalf of the Family Business Association of California, also in opposition.
Tricia Geringer, Agricultural Council of California, in opposition.
Ken DeVore with the National Federation of Independent Business. 22,000 businesses and 500,000 employees are strongly opposed. Thank you.
Matthew Harg with the California Business Properties Association and representing the California Downtown Association, opposed.
Braden Oprowski, California Association for Health Services at Home, opposed. Thank you.
Greg DeShere with the ARC and United Cerebral Palsy California Collaboration Association of People with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities and their families, friends, and service providers. We're a tweener, if I may have a couple of sentences. We support the intent of the bill. We have concerns about the costs, which, unless future legislation finds a way to pay for them, will eat up most of the emergency funding that everybody here works so hard to provide for our community services system.
Thank you. I'm going to count that as a tweener.
Thank you.
And one more.
Dwight Hansen on behalf of the Alliance. Also a tweener on this issue, agreeing with what what the ARC of California has said. The one thing I would tell you is that in this room are some leaders who got that increase forward, including Senator Leno, Assemblymember Bonta, and others who worked so very hard. That first increase to 50 cents will just about wipe out the value of the increase that was just given through the MCO tax. So the reality is we want to work with all of you. You're looking at a 6-year rollout. Unless this is funded, we are entirely dependent upon you for those funding sources. We don't want to come back every budget year and beg for the additional dollars it takes us to make this thing work. So we really need to put this in the budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Department of Finance.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Amy Costa with the Department of Finance, and we are in support of this measure. We estimate general fund cost in 2016-17 of $20 million general fund and cost of around $4 billion general fund upon full implementation. Our estimate for full implementation also includes the cost of implementing the IHSS sick day provisions of this bill. Additionally, our estimate includes some general fund cost savings associated with lowering caseload in our safety net programs of CalWORKS and Medi-Cal as the result of the increased minimum wage. Typically, our analysis compare proposal costs to current law. However, we feel it's instructive in this proposal to compare the impacts of this proposal with those of qualified ballot initiatives. Although we do see general fund costs associated with this proposal, we are supporting this proposal over previous proposals because it does offer the state greater flexibility if negative budgetary or economic conditions should emerge. The slower implementation also allows for greater planning to accommodate the scheduled minimum wage increases. Thank you.
Thank you. There has been a motion and a second, so I'm going to go to members' questions or comments. We'll start with you, Mr. Obernolte.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Leno, in your opening...
Yes.
It's on. Is the microphone on?
It's on. It's on. It's just not on.
Senator, in your opening, I heard you say that you believe that a rise in the minimum wage will result in a decrease in unemployment. Is that correct?
I do believe. I said that it is not a job killer.
So I have to respectfully disagree with you. And this issue that we're grappling with of stagnant wage growth is not a new issue. It's something we've been grappling with since the dawn of human civilization, basically. And there have been dozens and dozens and dozens of studies done on not just the United States, but countries all over the world, and not just in our time area, but for the last several hundreds of years on the effect of a rise in minimum wage. And almost invariably, the effect is a rise in unemployment. And that's my big concern about this, because I think we need to keep in mind that the ultimate minimum wage is not something we control. The ultimate minimum wage is zero, and that's what you make if your job no longer exists. And I'll give you an example of that. I just got an email yesterday from a man that I know that manages a small manufacturing company. He has 150 employees. And they are assuming that we're going to pass this today, and they're assuming that this minimum wage increase is going to go through the entire legislature and be signed by the governor. And they're already thinking about what to do with this. They can't raise their prices because they compete in a global economy, and they wouldn't be able to sell their products if they did. So their only choice is going to be to increase the amount of automation on their line. They can afford to do that because it's cheaper than paying their employees 50% more. And they're going to have to outsource more of their assembly. They're going to buy components that are assembled elsewhere instead of assembling them here. And the result of that is going to be a loss of 50 jobs on their manufacturing line, and we're giving them no choice in that. So that's my biggest concern with this bill. And unfortunately, I think we need to be mindful of the fact that when we take away an entry-level job, we are costing those employees not just the amount of money that they're making now, but also all of the future wages that they would get, taking the skills that they learned in that entry-level job and applying them to a better-paying job in the future. So that's my concern with the bill, and that's why I'll be respectfully opposing it.
I appreciate it, Assemblyman. I know that we can point to any number of anecdotal situations, and clearly there are endless varieties of different types of businesses and endless varieties of different industries, and each have their own special situations. But we can look, and we have some very esteemed economists here who can refer to their own studies, but I'm familiar with any number of them. For example, there was a study across the border of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. One side of the border had raised its minimum wage for fast food workers, the other had not, and then compared what became of the economies of each state on either side of the border. We can look here in California, as I mentioned. We raised our minimum wage from $8 an hour to $10 an hour over the past 20 months. And over that same 20-month period, we've gone from 7.4% unemployment to 5.5% unemployment. I'm not saying there's a causation there. There's definitely a correlation. But there is no indication that this slowed the growth or impeded the growth of our recovery, or that it was responsible for the loss of jobs. What I understand, and I know there are a variety of economic models and economic philosophies, but that when our lowest wage workers, who can barely afford the cost of housing in California, imagine trying on $20,000 a year to afford anything to rent for less than $1,000 a month and still be not paying 50% of your income on your rent, that when these low-wage workers have just a little bit more money in their pockets, they don't send it to bank accounts in Switzerland. They spend it at the corner store. More and more dollars being circulated within our local communities. It does, in fact, increase demand for goods and services. This is a fact. And when there is a greater demand for goods and services, employers have to hire more workers to meet that demand. Then we have even more people earning slightly higher wages and putting more money into our local economies. This is what economists refer to as a virtuous upward cycle. We've already established that in California. We believe that SB 3 will only add to that existing and current success. The opposite of that is you continue to keep people in poverty who are working full-time jobs, like college graduate Steve, who told us his story. It's a factual story, and it's not a rare one. It's the rule, not the exception. That when people are kept in poverty and don't have money to go to a movie, to go to a restaurant for dinner, to spend any money in their local communities, then there's a lesser demand for goods and services. That's when employers have to let people go. And then you have fewer people spending fewer dollars, and that's a vicious cycle downward. Those are the different models.
Sure.
And I know we have different buy-ins to those philosophies, but we have actually experienced the virtuous upward cycle in the past 20 months here in California, and it's rather undeniable. But if you want more factual information from the professor, we have him here for you.
I understand. I've read the studies, and
yes.
Unfortunately,
and I know we're both small business owners.
Yes,
you're more successful than I.
the data that the data that I've seen, though, really does not largely bear that out, that cascading effect that you're referring to. And if you want just a recent example, we've got our neighbors to the north, Seattle, who had this exact same problem, the one that you just articulated, about workers not being able to afford housing. And so they tried a large minimum wage increase, and in the last 9 months, they have had a rise in unemployment in that city that is greater than anything that they've seen since the Great Depression. And I'm not talking about a few years ago, I'm talking about 1929. And so I think that that's a cautionary tale for us here in California, and that's my fear if we pass this today.
Madam Chair, if we could have a response from Professor Reich.
I would love to hear one.
Sure. Professor? She would. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. First of all, I don't take an ideological stand, for or against in the studies that we've done. Instead, what I do, and as Ken Jacobs mentioned, is look at the effects that both the proponents and the opponents talk about. And Senator Leno has done a great job of articulating what each of those positions are. And when we quantify those, put them in a single model, and estimate them, and this is a relatively new technique. It's not in the academic literature yet, but it turns out that the positive and negative effects somewhat more or less cancel each other out. And so if you talk about one and not the other, it's really an unbalanced
Okay,
account.
so I'm interested then in your opinion. Do you think that if we pass this would raise the unemployment rate in California or decrease?
No, I think it would leave it mainly unchanged. And I'm not familiar with your story about Seattle. There has been some reports that employment fell in Seattle. Not that unemployment rose, but employment fell. But that's all from very noisy preliminary data that's unreliable. And the government has just revised that data set, and all that decline in employment went away. But I wouldn't still listen to it. It takes about a year for really reliable employment data to come out.
Thank you. We're going to move on. I know Ms. Bonilla had a question.
I have a couple questions. One on the, and thank you for your work on this, Senator Leno, and for the expert testimony as well. On the delay or the suspension, I'm assuming that we're talking about when we say 2 times, it's consecutively, not in
No,
total.
not necessarily. It's a maximum of 2 times. There could be a year or 2 in between. This is all on the way to 15. Once we get to 15, all of this becomes moot.
So there's no suspension after 15, and only 2.
So the suspension is only about the next step up. So once we hit 15, the year later it goes adjusting to CPI, and that's that.
And then with a suspension, the whole schedule is pushed 1 year. So I guess,
so it could be conceivably pushed back 2 years.
Right, but only 2 years.
Correct.
Total.
Mm-hmm. 2024 for most businesses, 2025 for small businesses.
Just a clarification, but that's separate than being pushed back for job loss.
Right, so that's on the budget criteria as opposed to the economic criteria.
And I just want to make sure, so there are boundless numbers.
Yes,
if we were in a
correct.
deep recession, this could be pushed back to 2030, okay.
That would be based on the economic criteria. And keep in mind, this is the construct of the off-ramp / pause button authorized for the governor. But the legislature, again, we could imagine any number of horrific economic catastrophes. Who knows? A natural disaster followed by an economic catastrophe, all sorts of unknowns, climate change related things as well. There could be a situation, to date unknown by the legislature. The legislature always has the opportunity not only to make changes to this, but to repeal it outright. We cannot bind the hands of any future legislature. I'm not suggesting there wouldn't be political challenges to doing it, but if there were real economic reasons to do it, beyond the negative retail sales and tax receipts, which is a part of the governor's pause button. But if there were a severe drop in personal income tax or corporate tax, and the legislature was having an impossible time balancing its budget, I would imagine the legislature would have to say, these are extraordinarily tough times. We're going to have to do something about this. And they have that right.
Well, and we've had to do very, very difficult things in the past in tough times. So I would,
including suspending Prop 98. Some of you may not have been here, but I was, and it wasn't fun, but we did it.
Well, I would say it bears out the fact that the legislature is capable of making those very difficult and necessary decisions. I have another question. Thank you for clarifying that for me. That was helpful, and I think the point you just made actually points to the fact of why legislation is preferable to a ballot measure, because then the legislature can act, whereas with a ballot measure we would have to go out again to a vote of the entire state of California to make changes. Is that accurate?
Without a doubt. And the governor himself was very forthright at the press conference the other day when he was asked. And he said, let me be very frank. There's something looming out there that I think would not be good for the state. And he's looked at the polling. He's convinced it has a very high likelihood of passing. And he wants to take responsibility and create something better.
I'd like to ask another question, and that's on doubling the wage for salaried employees. And could you just explain to me, does that work uniformly across the entire state? I'm thinking of teachers, for instance. We have teachers who, honestly, I'm wondering if their entire wage scale would be affected by this, and I'm assuming it would be a positive effect, because when we talk about compaction of wages, when this is fully implemented, we're going to see quite a compaction. So does this apply to our public school teachers when it comes to salaried employees?
The provision you're talking about is about overtime. And as far as I know, teachers in California are not eligible for overtime pay. But in any case, the U.S. Department of Labor...
it only doubles for people who are eligible for overtime. So we could... here's my concern.
Well, let me just add, though, that the U.S. Department of Labor is very advanced in the process of raising the eligibility for overtime to everyone who is under $55,000 a year.
They're doing what? They're going to do that? They're talking about doing it?
They're doing it, yeah. And so this bill wouldn't change that in any way.
Can we get some more clarification on
So just to be clear, so if you're exempt from overtime, then you must be paid twice the rate of the minimum wage if you're a salaried employee. So because teachers are exempt from overtime right now, they would in fact have a minimum wage rate or minimum salary rate that went up.
Or they would pay overtime, right?
Or school districts could pay overtime. Anybody in the private sector.
There's no way you could ever pay enough overtime to a teacher, trust me. Because they work long hours. But, I mean, I guess I just want to, I mean, that was the question that came to my mind. I think we see that I believe our beginning teachers' wages are too low. They face some of the same struggles when it comes to housing and issues like that. So I was just curious as to whether that effect would happen for them, and I believe the answer is confirmed that yes, it would. Yes? Yes.
Either that or they'd get overtime, so yes, I think that they would do better.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome. Congratulations on the new appointment, and we'll throw you into the fire quickly, huh? Here we go. I'll bite on this. I got to tell you, I'm a little troubled by, but what I frankly see as some cynicism. Not in your position. You've been rock solid as to what you believe and why. The cynicism I find is with the Department of Finance, and I guess I want to put this out there and tell you why I'm troubled and see what the response is. The Department of Finance is supportive of this measure, and the reason the Department of Finance is supportive of the measure, we're told, is that there's flexibility in it. Almost a year ago, March 11th, 2015, the department put out its financial analysis of the last version of this bill, SB 3, and I will read from the comments in the Department of Finance's analysis. The net impact of an increased minimum wage on California's economy and state budget is likely to be negative. The Department of Finance went on to say it would overall lead to slower employment growth. This would lead to slower personal income growth and an anticipated negative impact on taxes collected. Nothing's changed economically in a year. The only thing that's different is the governor can hit a pause button. That's an important difference, and I'm glad that's in there. But isn't that cynical? It's saying to all these folks out there, we're going to give you this minimum wage increase. You're going to love us for it. You're probably going to vote for us for it. But our analysis tells us this will have very bad impacts on the economy, and we're going to push the pause button. That is cynical, and it is beneath the Department of Finance to take that position and play with the hopes and dreams of everybody that not only testified here today, but that is out there looking at this bill and thinking, hey, salvation is on the horizon. It isn't, because of that cynical provision in the bill and the department's honesty last year in terms of the negative effect this is going to have. Now, on the positive and negative effect, and I will ask a question with this. We hear from the distinguished economists that these positive and negative effects will likely cancel each other out. That could be why, in the face of the last minimum wage increase, we still have 13 counties in this state that have double-digit employment. They haven't seen the magical benefits because, of course, the Department of Finance told us those magical benefits aren't there. They haven't seen the magical benefits, but I guess that leads to the question, what's magic about $15? If the positive and negative effects cancel each other out and we aren't seeing any real economic growth, why are we at $15? What was wrong with the 13 that was tried last year? What's wrong with 20 instead? Why is 2022 or 2023 or 2024, if we hit pause buttons, why is that the magic year? Why not tomorrow? Why not $25 an hour? What's the economic analysis that tells this committee $15 somewhere down the road is the magic number for all the clouds to lift in all of these people's lives, unless you believe the Department of Finance and their cynicism? What's the magic in that number?